You thought love was healing. You thought that if you just gave enough time, presence, tenderness, she would finally stop running from herself. But Søren Kierkegaard warned us, life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. You've been living it backward, haven't you? Looking for meaning in her wounds, hoping that if you just stitched the pieces together, the woman would finally emerge from the wreckage. But she doesn't want to be saved. She wants to feel. And nothing makes her feel more alive than the chaos of falling apart. You assumed her scars were a prison? No, they're her stage. The breakdowns, the crises, the endless returns to pain, these are not flaws. They're rituals. And you, my friend, are just a passing priest in her temple of suffering. You mistake her self-destruction for a cry for help. But she never asked for help. She wanted an audience. And you, bless your heart, you gave her the front row seat and built the altar too. She does not crave the healer, she craves the wound. And you're addicted to healing her because it makes you feel like a man. But you're not a man in this story. You're a bandage. And bandages are ripped off the moment they begin to work. Let that sink in. You weren't chosen because you were strong. You were chosen because you were safe. And when safety grows boring, women like her run. Back to the flame, back to the fight, back to the wreckage that feels like home. You think she wants peace? Peace is her enemy. Stillness is death. She feeds off motion, especially the spiral downward. And if you stand in her way, she'll tear you down and call it freedom. You wanted to be her cure. But some women do not want cures. They want contagion. And the sooner you realize this, the sooner you stop sacrificing yourself to a woman who would rather bleed in style than heal in silence. So listen carefully. This is not a love story. This is a funeral for your illusion. And tonight I will bury every false hope you ever had about what it means to love a broken woman. Because the truth is this: she doesn't crave the healer. She craves the wound. And she will never love the man who tries to take it away. Here's the first rule no one dares to say out loud. She doesn't want to be healed. Not really. She says she does. She might even believe it herself. But watch her when you offer peace. Watch her suffocate in the stillness. Watch how quickly she finds a reason to destroy what she asked for. You thought her brokenness was a wound. It's not. It's an identity. And what you fail to understand is that some women don't want to be saved. They want to be seen suffering. You keep showing up with answers, calmness, logic. You say, "I'm here for you." But what she hears is, "I'm trying to fix what I don't understand." You want to bring light into her darkness, but she's spent her whole life decorating that darkness. There are candles in the corners, mirrors that only reflect the past. Photographs of every man who tried to love her and failed. You're just the next one framed on that wall. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything no matter how absurd to avoid facing their own soul." That includes you. You tell yourself you're noble, that you love unconditionally. But you don't. You're just addicted to being needed. You confuse her volatility with depth. You mistake her emotional chaos for passion. You think the louder she cries, the more she must care. But passion without peace is not love. It's possession. And a woman possessed by her own wounds doesn't want healing, she wants witnesses. You want her to choose you. She wants to choose pain. She'll call it fate. She'll call it trauma bonding. She'll call it soul ties. But what it really is a refusal to become someone new. Because healing would mean letting go of the identity that got her attention. And you were never the goal. You were the mirror she used to confirm that love always ends in tragedy. So here's what you need to face. The moment you try to calm her storms, she will resent you for ruining the thunder. You show up with consistency. She calls it boring. You give her loyalty. She calls it weakness. You give her clarity. She accuses you of being emotionally unavailable. It's not that you're failing. It's that you're not chaotic enough to keep her stimulated. Nietzsche once wrote, "Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process, he does not become a monster. You thought you could love the monster out of her, but in the process you forgot to protect yourself. Now look at you, tired, questioning your worth, wondering if being a good man is even worth it anymore. You gave her stability and she spat in your face. You gave her peace and she left you for someone who promised her war. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility to learn. She doesn't want to be healed. She wants to prove again and again that all love ends in disappointment. And every time you try to break the cycle, you become the enemy of her narrative. She's not looking for safety. She's looking for sensation. Emotional thrill, toxic highs, the chemical romance of adrenaline and tears. You think, but I was different. No, you weren't. You were next. She never wanted the medicine. She wanted to stay sick so she could keep receiving attention. And if you stay long enough, you won't just witness her descent. You'll become part of it. You'll forget who you were before her. You'll shrink. You'll second-guess your instincts. You'll become soft where you once were steel. Because every man who tries to save a woman who doesn't want saving ends up needing to be saved himself. So here's your brutal truth. If she doesn't want to be healed, then your love is not an act of devotion. It's an act of self-destruction. Let her bleed. Let her rage. Let her burn every bridge. But don't stand there holding a fire hose, hoping one day she'll appreciate you for trying. She won't. Because peace reminds her of all the calm she's running from. Because healing means she has to stop being the victim. And she's not ready to do that. You were not rejected because you were wrong. You were rejected because you were right too soon. And in her world, right feels like control. So she will flee attack, sabotage, until she finds someone who doesn't try to fix her, but instead joins her in the spiral. But you, if you still think your love can redeem her, you haven't been listening. Here's the third truth. Her trauma is not a scar. It's a sanctuary. Her pain is not something she escaped. It's something she worships. You thought you were walking into a love story, but you walked into a cathedral built on suffering. And her God is the past that broke her. Every conversation circles back to it. Every new connection is filtered through it. Every moment of silence is filled with echoes of old wounds she refuses to release. Because to release them would mean facing a terrifying question, who am I without my pain? And that's the question she can't afford to answer. Because without that pain, she has no story. Without the story, there is no sympathy. And without sympathy, she'd be forced to take accountability. So what does she do? She wraps herself in tragedy like a priest wraps himself in ritual. She confesses. She weeps. She dramatizes. But she never changes. Because trauma has become her doctrine. It defines who she's allowed to trust. It dictates how far she'll let you in. It governs her rituals of emotional sabotage. She'll say, I just don't want to get hurt again. But what she means is, I don't know who I'd be if I stopped being the girl who always gets hurt. And you show up thinking love is the antidote. You want to introduce a new theology, one built on presence, on peace, on growth. But you're an infidel in her temple. You threaten the very belief system she spent her whole life constructing. Kierkegaard wrote, "The most common form of despair is not being who you are, but you know what's worse? Being convinced that your trauma is who you are." She clings to her wounds because they give her power. Power to control. Power to deflect. Power to keep you in a loop of guilt and sacrifice. She says men always leave, so you stay. She says people always betray me, so you prove her wrong. But you're not actually proving her wrong. You're just delaying the moment when she'll make you prove her right. And when that day comes, when she pushes you to the edge and you finally walk away, she won't learn. She'll simply add your name to the list of reasons why her trauma was always justified. This is how the cycle survives. You cannot reason with someone who believes that pain is proof of depth. You cannot build intimacy with someone who believes safety is suspicious. You cannot grow with someone who believes healing is a betrayal of the self. You want to build. She wants to relive. And every time you lay another brick of stability, She'll find a way to shake the foundation. Not because she hates you, but because she's terrified of becoming someone who no longer needs to be saved. Because if she stops needing to be saved, what purpose do you serve? Your presence reminds her of a version of herself she's not ready to become. And so she resents you for it. She lashes out. She manipulates. She punishes your patience as if it were arrogance. But listen carefully. You can't outlove a belief system. You can't out-sacrifice a woman's religious devotion to her past. She will light candles for ghosts you've never met. She will kneel before altars of betrayal you never committed. And she will crucify you again and again for the sins of men you never were. You think love is the answer? Love is blasphemy in her church of pain. And the more pure your love is, the more she'll try to taint it, because purity is foreign. Purity is dangerous. Purity makes her feel unworthy. So she'll corrupt it. She'll test it. She'll twist it. Until it looks just as messy as what she's used to. And then she'll say, "See, you're just like the rest." But she's wrong. You're not like the rest. You just stayed too long in a place where love was never meant to survive. So the third truth is this. Her trauma is her religion. You're not her partner. You're the heretic she has to burn to feel holy again. You believed you were the exception. You thought she's just never been truly loved. Once I show her what real love looks like, she'll finally calm down. And so you tried. You stayed. Through the storms, the silence, the sharp words that cut your masculinity down to nothing. You told yourself, this is what love demands. This is what healing looks like. But what you called healing, she called control. What you thought was sacrifice, she called weakness. You thought you were saving her, but really you were feeding the illusion that she is forever broken and that someone else will fix her without her doing the work. Kierkegaard said, "It is the duty of the human understanding to understand that there are things which it cannot understand." You didn't understand that. You tried to interpret her chaos as mystery. You called her unpredictability depth. You mistook her broken behavior for tragic beauty. And what did you become in the process? A beggar, begging her to see your value, begging her to recognize your loyalty, begging her to just stop breaking things that didn't need to be broken. But a man who begs has already lost. Because he's no longer building love, he's chasing identity. And she sees it. She feels it. And she loses all respect the moment you put her needs above your self-worth. You thought it was strength to endure her chaos. But she sees it as proof you don't have boundaries. And to a woman ruled by pain, a man without boundaries is not a protector. He's a tool, and tools are meant to be used. You thought you were the hero. But she didn't need a hero. She needed a mirror to reflect her drama back at her. And the moment you stopped reflecting pain and started offering peace, she discarded you. Because peace doesn't give her the narrative she's built her whole identity around. Understand this. Some women only know how to feel loved when they feel conflicted. The deeper the wound, the more real it feels. So when you show up calm, composed, dependable, you don't feel real. You feel foreign. You feel fake. So she will provoke you. She'll push you into arguments, into defensiveness, into reaction. She'll scream just to see if she can make you bleed, because your composure is a threat. And she will not tolerate peace that challenges the way she defines love. Nietzsche once warned, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." But what if her why is to never truly be love? What if she only feels alive when there's conflict? What if she has no blueprint for real connection, only patterns of chaos? You stayed because you believed in the dream. You believed that love could transform anyone. But the illusion of the savior is not love. It's ego. You didn't love her for who she was. You loved her for who she could be, if only you tried hard enough. And that was your sin. You were never trying to heal her. You were trying to prove to yourself that your love had divine power. But real power doesn't chase. Real power doesn't fix. Real power walks away the moment it sees someone choosing to drown in the shallow end. And yet you stayed. You begged, You adapted. You compromised yourself down to a version she could almost tolerate. And in the end, she still left. Or maybe worse. She stayed, but with dead eyes, with cold hands, with resentment that grew every time you didn't match her chaos. Because what she really wanted was a man just as broken as she was, not one who tried to pull her out of the fire. You walked in with water. She handed you gasoline. You called it love. She called it boring. And now you're empty. Not just of love, but of belief. In yourself, in women, in connection itself. This is the collapse. This is what happens when the savior illusion dies. You either become bitter or you wake the hell up. You either become the next ghost she mourns or the man who never looks back. But make no mistake, you cannot save a woman who feeds off pain. You can only choose whether or not to die with her. You want to know what real masculinity looks like. It's not in how much pain you can absorb. It's not in how long you can endure chaos, neglect, or emotional whiplash. Real masculinity is the brutal strength to walk away from what insults your peace, even if you once loved it. You've been told your job is to protect, to carry, to fix, to forgive endlessly. But listen to me. A man who sacrifices himself for a woman who won't change isn't noble. He's suicidal. She threw her pain at you like knives, and you stood there with your arms wide open. Not because you're brave, but because you've been programmed to believe that your worth is measured by how much you're willing to bleed. But masculinity is not martyrdom. Masculinity is boundaries. Masculinity is standing at the edge of her storm and saying, "This is where I end." And that is your chaos to manage. You were not born to be an emotional sponge. You were not sent to this earth to be someone's therapist, savior, or crash test dummy. You were born to lead yourself first, to build, to protect, to forge order where there was none. But you can't do that when you're drowning in someone else's mess because you're too afraid to be called heartless. Let them call you heartless. Let her call you cold. Because sometimes walking away is the most loving act you can commit for yourself. Carl Jung wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But you can't become who you truly are when you're constantly shrinking to fit the broken mold she demands." And let me tell you this. Some women test your masculinity not by challenging your strength, but by challenging your limits. She pushes to see, will you bend? Will you break? Will you abandon your principles just to prove you love her? If the answer is yes, she will never respect you, because you just confirmed the fear she buries under all the noise. That no man is solid. That no man is real. That every man is just waiting to be swallowed by her chaos. So when you don't collapse, when you walk away instead of breaking, you force her to confront the one truth she's been running from, that her pain is hers, and no one is coming to save her from it. You think leaving makes you cruel? No. It makes you dangerous in the best way, because a dangerous man is not the one who hurts her. It's the one she can't control. And here's the irony. The moment you stop trying to heal her is the moment she finally sees you as a man. But by then it's too late, because you've already stepped into your power. And your power doesn't live in her story anymore. You stopped being the chapter she rewrites and became the book she never finishes. That's masculine brutality. Not fists, not volume, not anger. Disengagement, distance, silence, unapologetic absence. Not ghosting, but graduating. Not disappearing out of weakness, but stepping away with the calm of a man who refuses to die slowly in a woman's emotional war zone. You want freedom. You don't find it by begging her to be gentle. You find it by no longer needing anything from her. You reclaim your power the moment you stop asking her to understand it. You don't have to explain your exit. You don't need to justify your silence. Because real masculinity doesn't negotiate with emotional terrorism. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Her chaos is not your fault, but your participation in it is your choice. And the most brutal choice a man can make, the one that separates boys from warriors, is this. I see your pain. I know I cannot fix it. And I refuse to die proving that I tried. So no, don't call her. Don't write letters. Don't send closure. She doesn't need closure. She needs consequences. And the consequence of disrespecting a man's love should always be his disappearance. Not as a punishment, but as a standard. She will cry. She will rage. She will call you everything but a man. Let her. Because in the end, you didn't leave her. You left the role she cast you in. The healer. The fool. The savior. The man who waited too long. And now, you're becoming what she was never ready for. A man with nothing to prove. This is the final rule. And it's the one most men refuse to obey. Walk alone or die in illusion. Because the illusion is warm. The illusion tells you that love will save you. That if you're just patient enough, kind enough, forgiving enough, she'll finally see your worth. That the chaos will calm. That the storm will pass. That she'll return to you with soft eyes and say, "You were right. I just needed time." But that moment never comes, and you know it, because you've waited. You've waited through betrayals, through cold silences, through apologies soaked in manipulation. You've waited until you became unrecognizable to yourself. You sacrificed your peace for a woman who never asked to be saved, but also never wanted to be left alone with her wounds. She doesn't want healing. She wants a companion in her suffering. She wants a man who will drown with her and call it devotion. And if you keep waiting for her to become someone else, you will die. Not in body, but in soul. Every day you stay inside the illusion. A part of you withers. Your ambition softens. Your strength erodes. Your vision fogs. You start confusing loyalty with masochism. You start mistaking pain for depth. You convince yourself that suffering is love, because at least it feels intense. But intensity is not intimacy, fire is not warmth, and obsession is not devotion. You wanted connection. What you got was emotional enslavement. And here's what makes it worse. You knew. From the beginning, you knew. The moment she blamed you for her past. The moment her compliments became control. The moment you apologized for things you didn't do just to keep her calm. You knew. But the illusion was stronger than your instincts. Because the illusion was beautiful. It promised meaning. It whispered, "This time it will be different. This time she'll heal. This time you'll finally matter." But illusions don't love you back. They devour you. And once you wake up, there's only one path left. Solitude. Not the kind of solitude that's bitter, not exile, not loneliness, but the kind of solitude that restores you. The kind that reconnects you with who you were before her pain became your job. Because truth demands solitude. Clarity begins where codependence ends. And until you stand alone, you'll always be at risk of crawling back to the illusion. You see, walking away isn't just about leaving her. It's about leaving the version of yourself that needed her chaos to feel important. That's the hardest part. Because when you're no longer playing the healer, the savior, the martyr, who are you? You're a man again, untethered, unneeded, unchained. But here's the paradox. When you no longer need anyone, you become irresistibly powerful. Because you stop orbiting around emotion. You stop explaining your standards. You stop tolerating the things that insult your soul. And for the first time in a long time, you can look in the mirror and say, "I don't rescue people anymore. I build kingdoms. And if she cannot stand beside me in strength, then she will not stand beside me at all." Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "The greatest hazard of all, losing oneself, can occur very quietly in the world, as if it were nothing at all." You don't lose yourself all at once. You lose yourself every time you choose silence over truth. Every time you lower your voice to avoid a fight. Every time you stay when everything in you is screaming, "Leave." And eventually, there's nothing left but a shell. A man with no fire in his eyes, no steel in his spine, no mission beyond surviving her moods. So this is your crossroads. Do you walk alone? Or do you die in the illusion she built and you willingly sustain? Because this is the final rule. You don't get to become who you are unless you're willing to leave behind who she needed you to be. She needed you to be soft, to be patient, to be understanding to the point of self-erasure. But the man who walks alone, he becomes sharp, focused, untouchable. Not because he hates women, not because he's cold, but because he finally understands that love without respect is slavery. He doesn't chase, he doesn't fix, he doesn't explain. He walks, and that walk, the first step away from her pain, from your delusion, from the cage you built with your own hands, that's the moment you become dangerous again. Not to her, but to the illusions that once ruled you. And in that moment, you stop being the man who loved her and start becoming the man she was never ready to meet. So now you stand at the edge of something final, not heartbreak, not regret, but awakening. You didn't lose her. You lost the illusion. And that is your liberation. Because now you know, she never wanted the healer. She wanted the wound. And no matter how deeply you loved her, she would always crawl back to the pain that felt more familiar than your peace. This was never about her. It was about the part of you that couldn't walk away. The part of you addicted to the drama, the chase, the fantasy of being the one who finally saves her. But no more. You don't save people who are committed to drowning. You don't build temples in the middle of burning houses. You don't light your soul on fire just to keep someone else warm in their chaos. You walk. You walk with silence in your throat, steel in your spine, and fire in your eyes. And the world will tell you you're cruel, that you lack empathy, that you should have stayed. But those voices, they come from people who've never had to claw their way out of someone else's darkness. They come from men still shackled to their own illusions. Let them speak. You are not theirs to define anymore. You've earned something more than comfort. You've earned clarity. And clarity is painful, yes, but it is clean. It is cold. It is freedom. Because now you see what she truly was, a teacher. She taught you the difference between love and dependency, between connection and captivity, between being chosen and being used. And your final test, the one every man must face, is simple. Can you walk alone through the fire without looking back? Because you either walk alone or you die buried in the rubble of someone else's story. You either embrace your solitude or you keep trying to fill it with women who are terrified of peace. There is no in between. You wanted answers. This is your answer. You were never meant to save her. You were meant to save yourself. And now you've been handed a choice so sharp, it will cut through every lie you've ever told yourself. Continue chasing women who crave the wound, or become the man they were never strong enough to keep. This is not cruelty. This is evolution. Because at the end of it all, there is no woman. There is no savior. There is only you and the mirror. Walk alone or die in illusion.